Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Russell and Nominette, for putting on the event today. I wanted to speak today about the future of the internet most broadly. It's 50 years ago almost to the day that the internet's heart began to beat, and at first it was a barely detectable flutter, registering of all places in Teddington in Oxfordshire. In 1967, the UK's National Physical Laboratory conducted a revolutionary experiment in packet switching, the transmission and retransmission of data around the nodes of an embryonic computer network. And that network became fully operational in 1969, the same year that Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon. And then in 1973, it began to grow further, reaching out across the Atlantic and linking up with the network developed by the US Department of Defense. And the interconnections multiplied exponentially as networks were merged. Some of you may have been involved. My mother worked on this at the University of Manchester at the time. And the knowledge was increasingly shared and pooled and then hyperlinked, and the first protocols were laid down. In 1982, the science fiction novelist William Gibson coined the term cyberspace, referring to the distant future made real just 7 years later with Tim Berners-Lee's invention of the World Wide Web. And then in the early 90s, in one of the most far-sighted and far-reaching decisions of the 20th century, the backbone of the internet, hitherto used exclusively by government and universities, was opened up to commercial traffic. And at this point, I think we can say that the internet as we know it was born. And it was 10 years ago that we developed the concept of a national internet forum modeled on the Global Internet Governance Forum, the UKIGF, which was created by the World Summit on the Information Society in 2005. And we've since seen the UKIGF become a model for over 100 similar national and regional internet fora worldwide. Today I want to talk broadly about the future of the internet, about the extraordinary impact that it's had, and about what we need to do to harness its exceptional power while preventing harm and abuse so that the internet serves humanity, spreads human ingenuity, and enhances human freedom. These things happen because the internet is open and free. And in the battle to keep it open and free, even the most ardent supporter of new technology, like me, needs to acknowledge that untrammeled and in the wrong hands, the power of the internet and big data pose serious risks that even digital enthusiasts must be alive to. The question and the challenge of our age is how to reduce those risks, yet embrace the opportunities. The debate is moving fast, and we must be in the driving seat of it globally. And the development of the internet, in my view, is like the growth of a child. At first, it was small and its true potential unknown. The internet then grew into its youthful adolescence. The potential was clear, and that potential was exciting. The freedom brought was liberating. It challenged everyone who came before and asked them to justify why they do things the way they do and why not differently. Like a teenager, it bridled against constraints and took risks. This was vibrant and bracing. The energy, the change. And it developed in ways that we could never have imagined. The extraordinary benefits and innovation that the big platforms brought were hard to foresee, and hugely beneficial to people right across the globe. Google helping to inform the world, Amazon cutting your shopping bill, Uber getting you there faster and cheaper, Apple building amazing products and helping to save the music industry. And we saw even more of those amazing products last night, and I can't wait to get my hands on one. Facebook connecting us, and Twitter helping people to communicate. This period of tech utopia was built on a libertarian attitude that the online world was different and the old rules could be cast aside. As we all learn as we move from adolescence into maturity, coming of age means taking more responsibility for our actions, and so too now must the internet and the big players on it. In many ways, the platforms already recognize they must take responsibility for what's on their sites, and they're not simply conduits for the content there. For several years, for example, excellent collaboration has been in place to take down terrorist and extremist material online, although much work remains to be done. Britain led the global collaboration to remove indecent images of children from much of the web, and the platforms played an important part in that. Sometimes we do need regulation, like with the age verification laws to prevent children viewing porn easily online, just as they do offline. In the economic space, the agreement signed earlier this year to remove pirate music from search returns has been very successful, as platforms have taken more responsibility for their content. In other words, we need to build an internet based on liberal rather than libertarian values, where we cherish freedom yet prevent harm to others. We seek an internet that is free and open and safe, that fosters innovation, where standards are driven by experts, in which stakeholders have a say in how the internet is run, and where the major players act to prevent harm. And I want to see Britain leading the way as the best place in the world and where this debate happens, and crucially also as the best place to start and grow a digital business so that our ecosystem here continues to grow and thrive. To achieve this, we must create the world's most dynamic digital economy, giving digital businesses access to the investment, the skills, the infrastructure that they need to succeed. Our digital skills partnership, for example, the introduction of coding in the curriculum for every child, the 1.7 billion superfast broadband rollout, the 1.1 billion next generation full fibre and 5G strategy, our support for enterprise, our support for startups, which make the UK the leading tech hub in Europe, our work to promote open data. These are all vital to getting this right. We're focused on ensuring Britain is one of the leading places to develop new technologies being invented as a result of the web, all the way from autonomous vehicles to artificial intelligence, and indeed from artificial intelligence in autonomous vehicles and beyond. We want the UK to be a world leader in innovation-friendly, agile regulation. For example, like our fintech regulatory sandbox, now copied by other regulators at home and abroad. So the UK is already the undisputed tech hub of Europe, growing faster than the rest of the economy and growing fastest outside of London and the southeast. The goal is to attract, support, and galvanise the brightest and best talent, the most innovative companies, and cutting-edge ideas. In fact, just over the last year, if we look at the major investments from Google and IBM and Amazon, Facebook and others that have contributed to add the momentum behind UK tech. And I'm proud to say that as the first ever dedicated Minister for Digital in the UK, my team and I will not rest in this work. As well as this effort, our new digital charter, announced by the Queen in the spring, is our framework for how businesses, individuals, and our wider society should act in the digital world based on an agreed set of principles. We will develop the charter with input from businesses, academics, charities, and the wider public, for this is a task that we can only do together. Our starting point is that the delicate and careful limits that we've honed over generations to govern life offline should apply online too. When it comes to online safety, for example, the Crown Prosecution Service have recently made clear that abuse online is just as serious as offline. And as part of the digital charter, our internet safety strategy is looking at how we can tackle such abuses online so everyone can safely access the benefits of the internet. And we'll set out a new code of practice on what social media providers must do in relation to conduct on their platforms. The extent of abuse online is totally unacceptable in a civilized society, and we have a duty to stop it. All those involved in perpetrating online abuse, whether posting vile materials or the platforms on which the vile material resides, have a social and moral duty to act, no more turning a blind eye to abuse online. And part of protecting people online is protecting their data. I can confirm that tomorrow we will publish the Data Protection Bill, which will bring our data protection regime into the 21st century, giving citizens more sovereignty over their data and greater penalties for those who break the rules. Alongside strong data protection, We have a multi-billion-pound national cybersecurity strategy that I know you talked about this morning, being spearheaded by our excellent new National Cybersecurity Centre, a model, again, being emulated around the world. With AI and machine learning, data use is moving fast too. And I think people are increasingly realizing that good use of data isn't just about complying with the regulations, but it's about understanding the ethical use of data too. Good data governance isn't just about legislation, as important as that is. It's also about establishing ethical norms and boundaries as a society. And this is something our digital charter will address too. All these are just part of what it takes to make the internet safer. And as the internet comes of age, it needs to acknowledge its responsibilities. There is much to do. As well as facing up to the realities of these social challenges online, so the second part of the digital charter is about ensuring there is a fair economic landscape online too. For example, for starters, we've equalised the penalty for copyright infringement to be the same offline as it is online. We're supporting further copyright reform to support rights holders and help close the value gap. Where value is created online, it must be appropriately rewarded. As the UK leaves the European Union, we'll ensure we have one of the most robust systems for protection of intellectual property anywhere in the world, for all civilized societies are based on the fair and equal protection of property rights. And this impact of digital disruption is far-reaching. I mentioned the music industry before. I think it's a really important case in point, because the music industry, over a long and painful time, has discovered in streaming a new business model that appears to be sustainable and is bearing fruit. And if you think about it, for a while, the rise of the internet threatened the entire music industry. And through streaming, they found a model to ensure that the content that's provided and the creators of that content can be appropriately rewarded in a way and a market that works. Yet the news media and the high-quality journalism that I think is such a vital public service, that has yet to find such a sustainable business model. And we must work together to get there. These issues are only just the beginning, and more will emerge over time. We must anticipate them and get all this right, and we can create a world-leading framework for understanding online conduct. We know lots of like-minded countries all around the world are facing the same issues, and there's a real benefit from standing at the very forefront of this debate. Our task is to strike that balance between freedoms and responsibilities online so that solutions can be applied globally and the whole free world can emulate our approach. That is our plan. So we have a broad canvas on which we must paint. The defense of freedom requires the protection of others from harm. And let us cherish that freedom and have confidence to lead the way and bring people with us. The history of the internet that I mentioned at the start is fairly well known, but what's less well known is that behind the Iron Curtain at the time, the Soviets were working on their own red internet. But despite a promising start, it was a dismal failure. The Politburo couldn't see the point, and the funding was pulled in the 70s. The finance minister at the time said that there was no need for a computer network in the Soviet Union because they already had machines that could turn the lights on and off in hen houses. It shows the huge opportunity cost that befalls a country when it fails to engage with this technology. And this prize for the country that gets it right is great. No one has yet worked out the balance between freedom and responsibility online. So the country that sets the rules in a way that is good for society and good for technological progress will gain a massive advantage. Liberal democracy itself is a British invention. As one of its founders, John Locke, said, "Where there is no law, there is no freedom, for liberty is to be freedom from restraint and violence from others." And that is as true of the internet today as it was of the civil governance of the 17th century. And this argument is catching on. Just this morning on the Today programme, you may have heard Evan Williams, who's the co-founder of Twitter, making the same point. He said, "You can be an ardent believer in free speech and also realise that someone's speech can limit someone else's willingness to speak." Now, the internet is an essentially British invention with some help from others. And so, once again, Britain must lead the way in bringing these two together and applying liberal values to the culture of the digital world. And you play a crucial part in this global leadership. From the common law to the standard gauge railway track, we've often played our role, setting standards in ages past. Let us once again do that in today's new digital world. Thank you very much indeed. Now, my speaking here was, the invitation was predicated only on my willingness to accept questions afterwards. So I'd be delighted if there are any questions from the room, and maybe we can have a discussion for a few minutes. Yes, the back.
My name is Sabine McNeil. My company is called 3D Metrics, and I'm the secretary of the law group at the British Computer Society. I've heard you speak wonderfully about digital before. My big question is now, is your department responsible for digital legislation? Because code has become the law, not words anymore. And I get the feeling that you understand that.
Yes, what a challenge. Yes, we are the department responsible for digital legislation. We even put the word digital into our title of our department last month in order to underline that point. Now, you say that code is the law, not words, but code is indeed made of words and symbols. And my view is this, getting the governance of this right will in part be around law and legislation. You know, tomorrow I'm publishing this very big bill on data protection. And when that's published, that will prove to everybody that we take legislation seriously as one part of the governance of data and the internet. But it isn't the only part. And we need to make sure that we as a society choose how to use this technology for the benefit of mankind. And if what you're getting at is that it's the algorithms that are in charge these days, rather than the nation state, I don't quite buy that. Because the nation state could choose to turn off the internet. It's just that we would lose enormous amounts from it. And what we need to do is bring a balance through good governance, a combination of legislative and non-legislative governance, to make sure that we harness the power of this technology for the good of mankind. After all, this technology is developed and generated by humans, and we need to make sure that it is used for the benefit of humans. And that's why I think that this move, this philosophical shift that is going on, that I very much support and try to push, from a libertarian laissez-faire approach to the internet that we must, it must all hang loose, to one where we support freedom and innovation in a way that, that mitigates harm, is a very important shift. And the big companies, as well as governments, have got a role to play, but it would be best if we did this at a global level, and that often happens when Britain leads the way. Yes, sir, at the end, and then I'll come to the front.
Thank you. Mark Wood, Chair of Nominet. Very good speech, thank you. You're right that the UK is the tech centre for Europe, but it's become the hub of Europe by attracting talent from across Europe and from around the world. And I spent a lot of time with startups in London, and there's a big shadow, which is the perception that your government is going to clamp down on immigration and is actually going to deter people from coming to the UK. And it's already causing uncertainty. You've got EU citizens not sure about their future status. How do you square that circle of being the open tech hub which the UK has become, with a clamp down on immigration and messages going out that actually the UK isn't going to be as welcoming in the future as it has been in the past?
Well, the message should go out, as it does from all levels of government, from the Prime Minister down, that we want to continue to be attractive and a great place for the brightest and the best. Of course we have to control immigration. That was the result of the referendum, and as a Remain supporter, I think that that is one of the messages from the referendum result, and we are a democratic nation, and it's very important that we that we follow that democratic decision. But we can do that in a way that makes sure that we continue to attract the brightest and the best. I don't want to steal the Home Office's thunder by going in more detail into immigration policy. But the crucial point is that in all of our messaging on immigration, yes, we talk about controlling numbers, but we also talk about being attractive to the brightest and the best. Sir.
Thank you. First of all, Khaled Fatal, chairman of the Multilingual Internet Group.
There's just a mic on the way, sir.
Thank you. Khaled Fatal, chairman of the Multilingual Internet Group. I was really pleased that you made it a condition to be asked questions. That's a departure.
No, they made it a condition.
They made it. It was you. Well, take the credit for accepting. I'll tell you why. Because whenever I have gray hair, whenever I listen to speeches by politicians, I always start by being cynical. I heard some statements that you made which actually gave me hope. And I'll tell you what they were. I've been talking about corporate social responsibility for more than 20 years. I've been talking about the challenges of laissez-faire, leaving it to industry to regulate itself, which led us to the economic crisis. The internet is no different. And we actually helped make the global internet multilingual because we believed it was a tool for human empowerment. So, and also, over many years, when I've listened to to previous ministers, I always talked about how the UK could take leadership in being this guiding light of what can work here, what be implemented globally. The challenge I see in pushing a global agenda on the issue of merging the role of social responsibility, corporate and social, and privacy and libertarian beliefs, is that we need to push our own agenda regardless of what others, especially the big friends in the US, because not everything should be accepted as freedom of expression. Especially in light today, you mentioned something about global terrorism. I'm sorry, this is becoming a speech, but it's not. The ability for extremist groups to radicalize through the internet is on unprecedented proportions. Earlier on, I was talking about the era of the unprecedented we're in.
Yeah.
This is being touched purely on the surface. Yeah. There's a lot that we need to do this, because this also helps in our fight against anti-radicalization. Yeah. So I'm on the same page. I really appreciate your speech. I'm eager to hear the deliverables of how we can make this happen, so that it does not become like another political statement. If you don't mind saying so.
Well, thank you very much. I think that was being complimentary, despite the fact I'm a politician. But I do care about this, and I think that there is nobody who is more enthusiastic about the positive power of technology to change our lives for the better than me. I grew up in this industry. My first job was fixing Y2K bugs in COBOL. And we were writing software that makes it easier for you to go online shopping. When you put your postcode into the internet, it brings up your address. That's thanks to my family business. And so we've been helping people with their Christmas shopping for years. If that isn't improving the lot of mankind, I don't know what is. Other improvements to the lot of mankind are available. So I'm a super enthusiast for this technology. But enthusiasts like us have to ensure that we make the argument for the internet as a force for good, which means mitigating harms. And there is I quoted Evan Williams from Twitter, because Twitter has been known as one of the most libertarian platforms, whose view was, if you get communication out there, that is good because people are good. And it is true that that's probably true for 95% of the people. But we have a duty as a society to, in his words, I thought he put it very well, to also realise that someone's speech can limit someone else's willingness to speak. That's one way of putting it, but there are other consequences. And so I concentrated really in the speech on the philosophy of this, which is that over generations, we have used political philosophy to balance the need. For instance, in free speech, we believe Britain is a free nation in which we have the principle of free speech, but it isn't an unconstrained principle. You cannot speak, for instance, a known mistruth about somebody that damages them. We've had libel laws, rightly, for years. And freedom operates in a framework. Now, what are we going to do about that? I did set out some of the things that we're doing. We're open-minded, open-ended in terms of the digital charter, in terms of what needs to be done. One other area I didn't go into is having the Data Use and Ethics Commission, which we talked about in the manifesto. And that is that body is about making sure that we not only operate in the space of legislation, but also in the space of ethical norms and behaviour. And we're also engaging with the big tech companies to try to win this argument within the tech companies. So there's a massive series of consequentials that come from this agenda. But I think the most important thing is to get our principled position in the right place, and from that the rest can flow. So there was a question behind.
Thank you. Excellent speech, by the way. Bahauddin Latif. I really want to talk about this freedom and responsibility online issue. And you said something about it. The country that gets it right will lead the world. Do you think Britain by itself will be able to lead the world when Northern Europe, in particular, Northern European portion of the European Union, shares many of the values of Britain?
Yes.
Will we be able to do this on our own? Shouldn't we still be part of that dialogue with
Yes.
European Union, for example?
Yes, we must be part of a dialogue.
But we will be out of it, won't we? I mean, by the time we implement these.
Yes, but we'll still engage with and talk to the European Union. We need to be in a dialogue with countries around the world, and especially free societies. And crucially make sure that this agenda is not seen as an agenda by authoritarian regimes that gives them any permission to be further restrictive. This is about liberal values. So yes, of course, we've got to work with the European Union, with the Americans, both at both the level of government and civil society and the corporates, and with others around the world. I'm going to Japan next week and Singapore, and we'll be talking about similar issues. But there is global leadership that can be provided. Firstly, the thought leadership and intellectual leadership, but also that because of the nature of the platforms, where we can persuade them or require them to act, they often then act globally. So the takedowns of music that did not have appropriate intellectual property protection was a policy that was worked on between the British government and the main platforms. There were a series of roundtables. It took about 2 years. They came to a concordate and an agreement with the British music industry in the room. But Google, for instance, which is the biggest player in that space, it made changes to its systems globally, not just for Britain, which have protected the intellectual property rights of music content recordings around the world. And so we can both try to lead this argument, but we can also have a direct effect to make improvements that then operate globally because of the nature of the platforms. Maybe one last question.
Thank you, Minister. My name is Rachel O'Connell, and I was delighted to hear you mention the age verification and the Digital Economy Act. And I am the technical author of the standard that will be published by the British Standards Institution in the coming weeks.
Okay.
Around how you do that.
I hope it's good.
It is. I think it's a huge huge amount of work. A lot of people have put a lot of effort into it. And
The two are not always the same.
And the point I was going to make is that the PAS, as a technical standard, you mentioned internet safety and concerns about radicalization, bullying, paedophile activity, the raft of issues that young people have to contend with online. And if we do want to mitigate risk, then we should think about extending the technical standard is written for all age groups. You can conduct an age-related eligibility check, so somebody can assert, I'm 14, and I just want people in this age group to be able to contact me, which would be mitigate a huge amount of paedophile, online trolling, bullying, and the other sorts of things that people have to deal with.
Yeah.
So my comment to you is to say, in the agenda and the digital charter about internet safety, to consider extending the use of that standard to mitigate internet safety risks.
Yes, I'm very open to considering that. It would be part of the internet safety strategy is the part of the digital charter which encompasses that area. It is based on it's about all ages, not just children, and I'd be very interested in taking that up, and maybe that we'll take it offline. But that's another practical example of how you can bring these principles, liberal values of freedom, but mitigating harm, to bear on the internet. So thank you all for your work internationally and in keeping the internet open and free. And thank you for taking the time this morning.